I know in my college classes, another thing that I have to break students out of the idea, and I see this in K-12 all the time, is that learning happens in these walls, and we go somewhere to learn between a certain time period, and that's where we go. And I've been working with teachers for a really long time, and most teachers don't necessarily have that mindset, but there are quite a few that, this is where learning happens.
Right.
And, you mentioned getting your students on Facebook and social media and all of that, and I do that also because basically that brings them out into the real world of learning. And I've had students, they've had technical problems, and they've posted something, and
Sorry.
hopefully all that was caught on tape. Anyhow, so they've had technical problems, and I've said we'll post it out to Twitter. And they've had the tech support team of whatever that app was or whatever it was they were trying to do respond to them with an answer I couldn't have given them.
Right.
And I think that's fantastic, and I think we need to change that mindset of learning as something you go someplace to do. Learning really is something that happens all the time, 24/7, no matter where you're at, you have the opportunity to learn. But that's a little bit of a hard sell for some people. They don't,
Right.
they hold on to that, learning has to happen within the classroom walls.
So you wanted to respond to that?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that come to mind. If we're going to talk about like education as the system, or as like Sir Ken Robinson explains it, like a factory, right? It's designed to just crank out educated people. Then I think within that system, we can influence and kind of choose our pedagogy wisely so that we can, again, like I said, be the most efficient teachers possible. And efficient teachers aren't about worksheets and kind of laying out as much as you can and let's get as much work out of them as possible. It's really about, let's construct something that's going to engage them and it's going to make them pour themselves into it. And that's what you're going to get out of it. And you had asked earlier about some of the hurdles that is in education, and I think perception is one of the major hurdles that we have, both from teachers and from parents, because many teachers teach like they've been taught. It's ingrained in us. It's what we know. We always did it that way. And what's really difficult now is once you get a teacher that overcomes that and they realizes there's a better way to do this because they've tried it both ways and they've felt it both ways, then you have a community of parents who have an expectation of what education is supposed to look like. And if you don't look like that, then you must not be educating my kids, and then they're not going to get into a good college, and then the system comes apart. So getting them to believe that no, what I am teaching them is going to not only prepare them for college and for getting them into college, but for life in general is, I think, one of the major challenges. And the way I like to do that is presenting student work. When they can see the students, the work, the projects that they have done, and they can articulate how they did it and what was difficult about it and what they got out of it, then all of a sudden parents start to come around. If I can't have the parents experience this type of learning, I want them to at least experience through their children. And I've become more successful with that as I've taught throughout the years, just kind of being able to pick those opportunities and learning again how to empower the students to articulate that to their parents so that they can kind of come on board. And I see both. I see parents who get it already, and I see parents who need to come around. And it's always an interesting dynamic in a year when we do that.
Well, and you mentioned that they want to be taught, or they want their kids to be taught the way that they were taught. And I mean, for so many generations, that was easy to do. Like if your father was a blacksmith and you grew up to be a blacksmith, and your kids would be blacksmiths, and
sure,
for generations up until reasonably recently in history. And I've said this before, there's nothing I learned in high school that prepared me to teach web design, which I taught for a number of years. There was no web design when I was in high school.
Right.
And so we're teaching kids, we're trying to prepare kids for jobs that don't exist. How do you even do that? So I always say you have to teach them to be curious and to learn. If they're curious, then they can learn, and they have a good skill set for filtering what they come across and using it, evaluating it. Then they can figure out anything they need to know for any job that comes up.
Right.
I have no idea what some of my kids will be doing 10 or 15 or 20 years from now.
Not sure what we'll be doing 10 or
I'm
15
not sure
years.
what we'll be doing 10 or 15 or 20 years from now. I'm certainly doing something, different than what I thought I'd be doing.
Well, you guys continue to bend my brain, and you got to cut that out because my brain's going to hurt if we keep doing this.
We're going to get the magic smoke?
We're going to get the magic smoke. We all know about the magic smoke. You said something that reminded me and just pulled me back into something that I should have been thinking all along. Because part of what we've been aiming at is really hard is aiming at educators.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a component of what we do that really needs to be evangelizing to parents.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I see what we do, the more I realize we need this huge platform of people to be listening, or we need a huge platform so we can get out there so lots of people can hear what we have to say. And not necessarily what I have to say, honestly. I mean, I'm going to go around and find people like, you and David Thornburg, Eric Scheninger. There's a lot of people out there that have some fantastic ideas about education. And to be fair, I've actually taken some of these interviews already, so I'm cheating a little bit because I kind of know what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. Here in the first interview here in the podcast. But we're going to find that not everyone agrees on everything.
Sure.
However, I'm still going to come back to this as I listen to these different perspectives on education. I still hear coming back this idea that you have to be curious on your own. You can't wait for other people to motivate you to be educated. This idea that you show up to school and you open the top of the brain and you pour in the knowledge and you close the top of the brain and you ship them back out. But that's how I thought about education, honestly, until I met you guys. But that's probably what the society has thought about education until very, very recently. And I still think there's a huge section of society that still thinks that. And part of what I want to do is I want to pull the curtain back on the wizard. I want people to see, hey, it's a lot simpler than you think. But oh, by the way, it's a lot more complicated than you think. And here's the issues. I just want to throw it all out on the table. I mean, the reason I love the makerspace thing is we just throw the technology out there. We just throw the kids in, and
it gets messy.
It does. It gets messy. It's sink or swim. I mean, we didn't. Did we get any tears this time?
No.
Well, we sort of did, but not from the students. But I mean, there's always this experience where people are a little bit uncomfortable. They're not quite sure it's going to work. There was a panic this morning over here. These guys' project was not working that well first thing this morning.
We had another project that almost went poof too. Their programming went down right towards the end.
Oh yeah, I mean, so there's always these things.
Then they came back and won the whole thing.
Yeah, I know, huh?
But the cool thing about education is that you can take the people and the experiences and throw them in, and it's almost like we're programmed to learn.
Yes.
If we will just let the process happen somewhat naturally, if we'll quit trying to shove it at people and go from the other way and say, well, what are you curious about? There's this internal drive in most of us, and I mean, you guys both know this. I'm having to learn this. You just have this innate ability to ask that one question that the student goes, I never thought about it like that. And then the wheels start to turn in the back of the head. I mean, I watched you all week, and I don't know how you got those kids to do that. You were never there at the group other than to sit there.
I'm not sure Clark is
You're
sure
sitting
he
there.
knows that
You were
either.
sitting there sipping coffee and watching the kids and asking a question now and then. They did really well. I intervened in that team the least that I've intervened in any team all summer, and they did fine. Maybe I'm just tinkering too much. I came through the system. I went through the whole lecture thing. You go to graduate school as in a physics or engineering or math degree, and you're going to hear a lot of lecturing. Really smart people get up in the front and they tell you everything they think about life. And that doesn't necessarily impart any learning.
Right.
There's a lot of information.
You could even say there's a lot of teaching going on, but not a lot of learning.
Well, and there's a difference.
Well, but the learning might be happening. I mean, by the time you get to graduate school, it's up to you. You either learn or you don't. And I would say there is a lot of learning happening, but it's not as a result of the teaching. I think we'd like to flip that, and it'd be nice if the learning happened as a result of the teaching, and the teaching doesn't necessarily have to be information transferred necessarily.
But I don't know if that's by the time you get to graduate school. That starts from kindergarten.
Yeah, that's probably true.
It really does. You can't. I mean, that quote of my teaching philosophy about how you can't teach anybody anything, you can only make them think. And you've heard me say dozens of times, my job as a teacher is to set up the learning environment,
right.
give them the tools, and get out of their way. Yep. And just be there to facilitate as needed. And I think that works kindergarten teachers already know that. The primary grades are really good at that. It's when we get higher up that we sort of drill and kill and push that.
Unfortunately, policy keeps pushing that drill and kill further and further down. Exactly. You mentioned something about this innate ability to ask the questions. I'm going to argue back and say it's not innate. That's something that needs to be developed in teachers, and it's something that
can be.
Right. And the whole the smoke and mirrors in my room, you see me sipping coffee, it's because I'm orchestrating so many other things.
You're the wizard in the corner.
And I've learned how to look at the situation and ask the questions that need to be asked. And sometimes the question is, can you explain to me what's happening over here? So I have one kid who's working on it and one kid who is seemingly off topic. I'm not sure what's going on. So you just ask them the question. I don't say, are you off topic? Do you know what you do? You need to get back over there. No, it's can you explain to me what's going on over here? And as they start explaining, then as the teacher, you start learning where the holes are and what they know. And it's like, okay, I think you're missing something over here. Can you two get together and you connect the dots? And can you explain what you're doing so that you get it? And you do that with all of them. And then it's a matter of watching, observing those dynamics and knowing when to get involved. But your involvement is not telling them how to do anything. It's asking what they are doing and having them tell you, and then taking that information and deciding on your next step of it.
Well, and as teachers, we know that your deepest learning comes when you have to teach somebody else about it.
Absolutely.
So anytime you can put a student in the position to teach somebody, even if it's another peer, you're helping them deepen what they know.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not gonna worry too much that you just said I was totally wrong as a physicist. I'm not supposed to be wrong. No, it happens all the time. I just ask Debbie.
We won't go there.
I think I was meaning the curiosity that should be natural. But I think you're right about the questioning. Good questioning definitely is a skill that must be honed. And if I watch the fantastic researchers that I know, they're able to get down to the bottom of a research answer really, really quickly because they know how to start with the right question. Right. So I would totally agree with that. I don't disagree with that at all.
And I'll say that you're right on with that innate ability to be curious. Whenever you take a look at early childhood development, before school starts, your first 5 or 6 years of life, think about how much that child learns. From day one, when their eyeballs first get hit by sunlight and they take that first breath of air, to figuring out who these blurry people are around them, to figuring out what these appendages are and what they're good for and what they do, to being able to roll over. Why is it every baby learns how to roll over right around the same age? Why is it every baby learns how to crawl right around the same time period? And if they don't, then we start looking at, something's wrong. It's because they're curious. It's because it's in them. That's why they stick everything in their mouth. They don't want to taste it. They're curious about what it is. And so they try it out, and then as they get a little bit older, they're more curious. I have had a much easier time explaining 3D printing to people under 5 than I have to people over 5. A graduate from our program, I had a hard time really articulating what it was because no matter what I said, they had a picture in their mind of a printer that printed a piece of paper with a 3D image on it. And until they actually,
like a hologram or something?
Yeah, exactly. And until they actually saw it, they needed that. Whereas the moment I told my I think he was 5 at the time, 5-year-old son, that we're getting a 3D printer and it'll print plastic things. He's like, I want you to print me this and that and this, and he just went for it with all the toys that he could think of. So it is innate in us, and we tend to lose that at some point because I think
it's not on the test.
It's not on the test. And I think if you think about it too, that first 5 years, there's a whole lot of don't touch that, don't touch that, don't touch that going on too, which, if it's a light socket, it's probably pretty important not to touch. But so we do learn that our environment can adversely affect us if we touch something or if we break something, whether it's the thing itself or if someone's going to get mad because I did it.
Okay, you got to stop that because
You need to give him his whole
Yeah, we need to give. We're gonna have to interview you, like for real, and we have to put you on a couple of times in order to get all the information out.
I'm happy to come back anytime.
Because as I watch here, and I keep coming back to the boot camp because this is sort of the first time in my life when I've actually been learning while the other students are learning. I mean, I got my own things that I'm learning. I'm not necessarily learning about the technology, although I do learn some things about the technology from the kids that I didn't know it would do.
Yeah, did you know an LED could split in half like that?
I did not know an LED would like that. That was catastrophic. That was
fantastic.
yesterday.
It turned red and then it went split.
Yeah, no, it totally did. But as I watched this, one of the things that I'm learning that we're trying to create in this boot camp experience or in the other learning experiences we try to present to kids and teachers, it is this idea that it is okay to explore. Mm-hmm. It's okay to experiment. It's okay to try stuff. Because I watch the kids, I watch the teachers interact with the technology, and I mean, very often I have this, okay, that's going to break. And then I ask myself, okay, dollar value, how bad is that? That's probably not that bad. Is it worth $5? Is it worth 50 cents? Is it worth $1? And honestly, I've been letting a lot of that go because you know what? I would rather them split an LED in half. That was fun the other day. They split the LED in half because after that happened, there were 2 or 3 other groups that had very specific sensors that do require a little more TLC than some of the plug-and-play ones that we have here. And it was a great motivator to say, well, we should probably add a resistor right about there so that the LED doesn't, glow red hot and split the LED in half.
Right.
Poof, and the magic smoke comes out. So, this idea that you do have to be a little bit fault tolerant.
Yes.
You have to allow
Yes.
for what we would normally call failure, which really isn't a misnomer in the first place, and I know that you guys will probably give it some other word or whatever, but the truth is that when you make what we would normally consider a mistake, what you're actually doing is having an experience that is on the one side of the, sorry, here comes the math equation, it's a negative feedback loop. It says don't do that one anymore, come back this direction. And then when they make the choice that works really well, that's like, oh, okay, this direction a little more. And we need both of those sides to this learning equation, and I think we try very hard to eliminate the failure out of this, and we don't give enough opportunity for people to go as far as they'd like to go. And the reason I like Maker Education is because we fundamentally want them to touch the tools and break a few things, try it out. I mean, I'd rather they didn't just like drop the printer on the floor, but most of them already know about gravity. But they'll try taking the board off, and they'll push a little hard, and the stopping action of the stepper will not be able to handle it, and the board will go slam to the ground. And I'll walk over and talk to them and say, hey, if you look in the computer right here, that's if you want to put the clip on the back, you just have to move the board back and clip right here, and it's non-fatal.
Right.
It's not a big deal. These printers are tough. The reason we use these is because they're tough, and we need to give them these opportunities. We need to pick things where it's okay for them to make a mistake.
Absolutely.
It's okay for them to try stuff.
Not just pick things, but it's social as well. You create an environment, a physical environment as well as a social environment, where the kids need to know, at least in traditional classroom, that hey, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to fail. If you didn't, then you wouldn't need to be here. I don't have a reason to teach you if you know it all already. And they need to learn how to react to other kids' failures as well. And I think that is more of a teachable moment oftentimes than other things. It's like, great, you dropped it, or you made the tray breakdown. Okay, so why did that happen? Well, how do we take a look at that? Do we want it to do it again? Probably not. So let's find a way not to do that, and then make sure that the kid next to him isn't laughing at him Or if they do laugh at him, that's the kid you chastise and go, why are you laughing at that? We all make mistakes, and now that he made that mistakes, we all learn from it. That was a great thing to do because we all just benefited from that, didn't we?
We're not as good at that in society, but we need to learn how to do that better. I mean, I think very often, we don't see that portrayed in the typical media.
No.
We don't really see that portrayed. I don't know, in the grocery store, you certainly don't see that. You see the mom with the steam coming out of her ears.
Sure.
But you're right. We need to create a social environment where it is okay to try things that are non-fatal, that aren't going to cause huge problems.